Right, it's my pleasure to welcome Chris Jaume from Cooper King Distillery. He's going to talk to us about sustainable spirits, gin, whiskey, and the circular economy. And I just want to keep out of your way now and let Chris take over. Chris, you're very welcome. Thank you for joining us.
Yeah, thank you, Peter. Thank you, everyone. Thank you for having me on. Hi, everyone. So, yeah, my name is Chris, and I'm the co-founder and director of Cooper King Distillery. Now, we're a self-built, crowd-funded distillery near York. We're the first in Europe to join 1% for the Planet. We produce the first carbon-negative gins in the country, and we plant 1 square metre of native woodland in the UK for every bottle of gin we sold, and over 10,000 square metres planted in our first couple of years. Now, the business was born out of an adventure to Australia, of all places, a few years ago. Back then, this was about 7 years ago, my partner Abby and I were in our late 20s, living in Leeds. I'd just qualified as an architect, and Abby had just got her PhD, and she was a scientist. Now, neither of us were particularly happy in our careers, and basically just decided to disrupt things. So we quit our jobs and bought one-way tickets to Australia, much to our parents' dismay, but I can thoroughly recommend doing that. So we soon found ourselves in Australia and then in Tasmania, which is a small island, fairly remote, just south of Melbourne. And while we were there, one of their distilleries won the accolade of producing the world's best single malt whiskey. Now, this had never been won outside of Scotland or Japan, so in the whiskey world was really big news. We had friends back home with a whiskey blog at the time, and we were backpacking, and as all good backpackers are, they are opportunistic. So I messaged the friends back home and said, look, we're over here, we're 20 minutes from this distillery. If you pay for our lunch, we'll go and visit all 3 distilleries on the islands and do a bit of a recce for you. They absolutely leapt to the chance and said, yeah, go for it. Go and visit all the distilleries on the island. They thought there were 3. Luckily, it turned out for us there were 8 distilleries. So we had this fantastic tour over 6 months, sort of every weekend driving out in our camper van there, as you can see on the bottom right, driving out to visit these cracking distilleries. It was a bizarre time because during the week we were fruit picking, to extend our visas, living a proper backpacker lifestyle, and on the weekends being treated as if we were these sort of whiskey experts flown over especially. Now, it very quickly came out from our visits to these distilleries that a lot of these people distilling whiskey over there had no industry background, no ties to Scotland whatsoever, and didn't have £10 million in the bank. So top right there's a picture of me and a chap called Peter Bignell. He was a rye farmer. He grew too much rye one year and decided, well, I'm going to try distilling it. The whiskey he produced was stocked in Noma, which was the world's best restaurant. So it was really inspiring for Abby and I. And we left England. We knew we wanted to work together. We just didn't know in what capacity. We loved our food and drink, and we loved whiskey. And then obviously stumbling into this scene just as it was receiving global recognition was really captivating. And if anyone's ever met an Australian, you'll know the sort of confidence can be quite infectious. So, we would tell people over there, we quit our jobs and we've come to Australia, and now we've set our sights on building a whiskey distillery back home in Yorkshire. And it was just like a pat on the back and, oh, good on you, when's it ready? There was never any doubt, which was really fantastic. In hindsight, it turned out embarking on and embracing that adventure turned out to be the best decision we ever made. It gave us the freedom to connect with our adventurous sides and time to explore what we really wanted from life, and gave us the courage to follow through this newfound vision, which was setting up a distillery with a difference here. So we're just, as I said, just outside of York. We returned about 4 or 5 years ago, Aussie twang and a tan and a big business plan, went to the bank and said, we've got this great idea. Can we have a loan, please? You can guess what they said. Absolutely not. Fair enough. So we set about fundraising. We set up a crowdfunding campaign. We created a company and sold equity. We attracted innovation grants. The way we distill is pretty unique. All this was a really, really steep learning curve. This wasn't something we had any practice at or any experience in. once we'd spent that first year pooling a pot of money together, we then built the distillery. Now I'm just going to skip on the next slide here. We built it from scratch. So this was friends, family, founders all coming together to build this with us. The photo of all the guys there sat on the top left, that's actually a friend's stag do who wanted to do something a bit constructive. So they came along and we put up the entire timber frame in a weekend. I mean, I absolutely thrashed them, I'm not going to lie. I don't think they expected to work quite so hard. So we finished building about 3 years ago, and our first gin launched 2.5 years ago. And since then, it's just been an absolute whirlwind of an adventure. You know, we're working with Michelin-starred chefs on collaborations and run a raft of international awards. So quite exciting so far. For us, producing flavor-driven, sustainable drinks has always been at the core of what we do. We believe from the outset that drinking good spirits needn't cost the earth. You know, on our travels, we were lucky enough to experience some of the world's most beautiful places. We're in the Tasmanian Wilderness World Heritage Site. We spent some time living up by the Great Barrier Reef and working there. So we were living in these fantastic environments, but we also unfortunately witnessed their destruction. Wildfires ripped through Tasmania soon after we arrived, and living and working alongside the reef for 6 months, it really opened our eyes to the damage being done to such awe-inspiring places. So for us, it was only natural that we wanted to create and preserve these places for future generations to enjoy, using our business as the tool to do that. With global warming and its dramatic and damaging effects becoming ever more present in the news, it is a subject many are acutely aware of, and the actions of both businesses and consumers affect the health of the planet. And we as a company are creating sustainable products for those people wishing to reduce their own environmental impact. So I'm just briefly going to talk about carbon negative gin. So this week we're actually celebrating the milestone of producing England's first carbon negative gin. That basically means that for every full-size bottle of dry or herb gin, everyone removes 1 kilo more CO2 from the atmosphere than it emits. And that calculation is based on the raw materials through production and distribution. It's been the result of around 16 months of solid work and an awful lot of data collection. It's really exciting to be able to share this news with you today. We literally just announced this last week. Now, you might ask in the first instance, why bother? Why have we done this? The answer is very simple. So greenhouse gases such as carbon dioxide cause climate change by trapping heat in the atmosphere, as many of you probably know. They contribute to extreme weather, rising sea levels, and threaten human and animal life. Individuals and businesses need to take action now to reduce their carbon footprint and limit global warming to 1.5 degrees C above pre-industrial levels. So as a company, we're taking the lead to fight climate change, and we're helping Yorkshire achieve its mission to be the UK's first carbon neutral county by 2034, which is a whole 16 years ahead of the government's target of achieving carbon neutrality by 2050. How did we do this? Again, quite simple, really. We did it by reducing the carbon footprint of our 2 core products as far as possible. And I'll talk more about how we actually, the sort of details behind that shortly. And then we offset the remainder with verified carbon credits to reach carbon neutral. Then we opted to offset 1 kilo further beyond neutral, meaning more carbon is removed from the atmosphere than is emitted. One of the biggest things we've done with this is we've made our carbon report publicly available on our website with the aim of sharing it far and wide and hopefully inspiring other businesses to follow suit. So if you're interested, please do take a look at the website and you can download that. We are a circular economy business, which in a nutshell means stopping waste, improving efficiency, and looking after both people and planet. It's also a mindset. It's about understanding the impact our business has on the environment and the damage it causes. You know, we are producing a product, we are causing damage, and then exploring ways to mitigate that damage with bold, decisive action. And it is through these actions that it's helped us achieve our carbon negative status. So I'm going to talk through, there's 8 in total, so I'm going to talk you through them now. Green energy is a big one. The distillery has been powered by 100% green energy from day one. It's more expensive, but hugely reduces the environmental impact of operations, supports Britain's energy dependence, and reduces reliance on fossil fuels. Saving energy and water is another big area. Traditional gin distillation methods require large amounts of energy and water due to the use of inefficient stainless or copper pot stills. Now, we have bucked the trend and one of only a handful of distilleries in the country to distill under vacuum on rotary evaporators. And there's my life partner and business partner and head distiller Abby there with our 2 rotary evaporators. So they require about the 1/10 of the energy that a traditional still would. And brilliantly, they save an incredible amount of water. So the blue liquid you can see in the sort of spiral column there, that's a closed loop condenser, a closed loop chiller system. And that saves us 26,000 litres of water a year, which a small distillery is no mean feat. Now, it comes with its advantages, and one of the biggest ones is flavour. So great, it's energy efficient and it reduces water use, that's fine. But if it doesn't produce a product that tastes fantastic, then the business is kind of dead in the water. So distilling under vacuum means we can distill at really cool temperatures. So when we distill using things like fresh basil or lemongrass, as we do, distilling cold just captures so much the flavors, but the clarity of flavor really carries through. If you're distilling hot, you're boiling everything up to 80 degrees C, and you can denature the flavor compounds. Food miles. So raw materials for us, we source them as close as possible to the point of distillation, and that helps us support local farmers and reduce the food miles. All the barley and wheat used in our spirits is 100% Yorkshire grown. I actually fulfilled a childhood dream just last summer and went and met the farmer there on the top left and rode in a combine harvester, which I'm not going to lie was quite good fun. And that was our barley being harvested for the whiskey. The lavender we use in the dry gin and the raspberries we use in the berry and basil gin liqueur are all sourced from family-run farms within 15 miles of the distillery. And closer still is the raw honey and the lemongrass that we use, which are harvested from our on-site beehives and from the polytunnel. So the bottom right there is my father-in-law, Graham. We have about 6 beehives at the moment that we have on site, and all our honey comes from there. And Yorkshire lemongrass, people are always amazed when I tell them that you could do this. I mean, looking out the window now, it's snowing quite heavily outside, but with a well-placed polytunnel, we're having some fantastic crops of lemongrass. Stopping waste is another area we looked at. So after each distillation run, we send those spent botanicals to a renowned bakery. There's a local bakery called Haxby Bakehouse, and they then upcycle them into breads and pastry glazes. Or we take those botanicals and compost them on site. If you ever smell a compost bin that's had juniper and coriander thrown in, it's absolutely delightful. We then use that compost to grow next year's botanicals, such as the lemongrass. On the whiskey side of things, all the spent grains from brewing, so there's about 500 kilos worth of grain, which is, once we've finished with it, it's a waste product. We have that collected by a local farmer who comes every week and feeds all that to his cattle. All other waste at the distillery is either recycled, and the tiny bit that is left, which is sort of general refuse, if you like, goes to a state-of-the-art incinerator, which is 17 miles from us. It's a really new project. It's been going a couple of years, and that generates power for local homes. 0 waste is sent to landfill. So those actions kind of looked at the process in the distillery, and now the next 4 I'm going to talk about are more about the product packaging, if you like, itself. Lightweight bottles. You may well know that most premium spirits bottles are packaged in really heavy glass bottles to give a perceived quality, the ones with a really thick glass base on the bottom. So we bucked the trend and we used a lightweight alternative. So ours weighs 250 grams less on average, and is also made from 55% recycled glass. Some of your super premium bottles can be made from 0% recycled glass, or maybe only 10%. Choosing that bottle basically means we use less raw materials, decreases transport emissions, and reduces the bottle's carbon footprint by 65%, which is a huge decrease. And for the customer, it saves money. Basically, as a customer, you're then paying for the liquid inside the bottle and not paying for the bottle itself. Plastic-free postage. So on the top right there, you can see a part of our origami cardboard box, which we developed with a local manufacturer. So the idea behind that is the bottles are only sent out in cards, and it's eliminated the need for all plastic packing materials like those inflatable cushions or bubble wrap. Any packing material we do use is made from shredded cardboard waste, often the offcuts from our boxes. And things like even the tamper-proof seals on the bottle there are paper and not plastic. Top left, the gin refill schemes. This is a really beautifully simple idea. We're actually the first in the country to do this. So back in 2018, we introduced a gin refill scheme where customers could bring their empty bottles back to the distillery for a refill, saving themselves some money in the process. Now, not only is it great for saving customers a bit of money, but it also, essentially a bottle for life. And it's really helped. It helps reduce the use of new bottles, saves on postage, keeps waste out of landfill, and helps raise awareness of the reduce, reuse, recycle mantra. And it's a great way. People talk about it. There's a sort of a badge of honor how many refill stickers people have got on the bottle. I mean, that customer there, I think, bought something like 7 or 8 bottles back in one go. And it's a great way of conveying what we do in a really simple to understand format. And we actually saw in 2020 versus 2019 an uptake of 35%, so an increase of 35% in people bringing their bottles back to be filled. Now, one of the biggest things we do is tree planting. So in addition to our carbon offsetting, it's important to state that the carbon offsetting is completely separate. We then tree plant. So for every bottle of gin, we plant 1 square metre of native UK woodland. And that's thanks to a brilliant charity partnership with Forge with the Yorkshire Dales Millennium Trust. Woodland creation promotes biodiversity, it reduces flooding, and it sequesters carbon and creates beautiful outdoor spaces for people to enjoy. For us, it's our way of investing in the future and basically doubling down on our commitment to the planet. And on top of that, each square metre of woodlands could lock away an extra 16.5 kilos of carbon over the next 50 years. I'm going to talk briefly about competitive advantages. I know there's a fair few businesses watching today, so we've found that building a sustainable business from scratch with a circular economy approach has created a huge number of benefits in a very short space of time. Our ethos and strong vision has attracted some really superb talent to join the team as we've grown. It's ensured a steady flow of new customers such as Booths, Ocado, English Heritage, The Botanist. All those companies have approached us. It's also secured us national press coverage in The Independent, The Guardian, The Telegraph, the BBC, and led to a high number of sort of fantastic, wholesome collaborations from which some really innovative products and processes have been developed. As an example, we developed a range of spirits for Tommy Banks's restaurant, the Black Swan at Oldstead and Roots in York. For those who don't know, Tommy Banks was the youngest chef in Britain ever to receive a Michelin star, and it's an absolute pleasure to work with. So at their restaurant, at the Black Swan, they grow things such as marigolds, which are on the top right there, so marigold flowers, fennel, lemon verbena. They pick them fresh, deliver them to us at the distillery, and on the same day, we cold distill them in those vacuum stills. And the result are just beautifully fresh and fragrant spirits. So distilled marigolds, which they turn into a marigold martini, which you can see a picture of on the bottom right. It's like summer in a glass. It's an absolutely stunning flavour, something really, really interesting. Ultimately, taking a circular economy approach to business to all that we do has ensured we have a sustainable and resilient business. And these days, it certainly helps to be resilient. Now, I think I'm just going to talk about one more. Just go back a second. Just going to touch on challenges. So running a business like this, there are lots of challenges. As an example, reducing the food mile. So sourcing all those ingredients locally, like the barley, you are completely at the mercy of the seasons and that crop's performance. So that barley crop last year, the one I helped harvest, actually had really high nitrogen levels and we couldn't use it, which was very frustrating. But thanks to good relationships with our maltsters and our farmers, we've managed to source some more Yorkshire barley from nearby that we can use. The plastic-free postage, the origami box, really simple, but huge problems with the couriers. They're not used to having people ship glass which isn't wrapped in plastic. I mean, we've had 0 breakages with that box. So we had to send through all the box designs and all the detail to the couriers to approve before we could use the networks. That was Royal Mail and Parcel Force. Interestingly, there is one carbon neutral courier in the UK, that's DPD. we can't work with them because they only accept glass bottles if you pack it in single-use plastic wrapping. So they haven't quite caught up with the times, and yeah, we're working on them. Hopefully they'll change their mind soon. And the other one was the refill. Again, as the first ones to do it, HMRC and trading standards had never been asked these questions. There was a lot of regulatory red tape to get through about duty stickers and all sorts. But I think the theme from this is just having really good, open, honest relationships with those bodies and talking through it. And it's worked brilliantly. And we've actually since helped several other distilleries across the country set up their own gin refill stations since. So it's sort of great to see that spreading beyond the four walls of this distillery. Now, I can't really talk today and not acknowledge the pandemic. So last year, business was booming. Then COVID hit. And during the last week of March, our sales plummeted and we lost 75% of revenue overnight, which was quite a terrifying experience, as you can imagine. We pretty much the next day, though, started receiving inquiries from the public and frontline workers as to whether we could produce hand sanitizer. We quickly understood there was a huge national shortage of hand sanitizer and that we could step up to help out. And for us, it made complete sense to do it. We're not just focused on our environmental responsibilities, but our social responsibilities too. Being a relatively lean and agile company, we researched, developed and produced that first batch of hand sanitizer within a 5-day turnaround, and then donated that the next day to members of the public. We put something out on social media and we had queues of cars, people coming to collect hand sanitizer. Over the following 6 months, we continued to donate it to our local community and over 60 charities and organisations across the UK, including York and Leeds hospitals, care homes, schools, mental health trusts, autism charities, and even mountain rescue. Despite losing the majority of our trade last March, businesses actually thrived over the last year. And I believe collaboration is the key to that. Thanks to the agility of our business and the diverse collaborations we had, Tommy Banks included, that sort of network of businesses have managed to come out stronger because of it. And again, Tommy's a great example. They're a restaurant, they had to close. Hospitality's been really hard hit, as everyone knows. They had to move online, and we developed bottled cocktails and things to help aid their takeouts, which have really taken off. And of course, there's also been fantastic reciprocal support from our local community. Trade customers and loyal public who have increased their purchasing over the 12 months and actually more than filled that COVID gap. It does seem that kindness is repaid, and we're really, really thankful for everyone for supporting us over what has been a very challenging 12 months or so. Finally, I'm going to talk about our future plans. There's quite a few. We've always got lots of things up our sleeves, always working on a lot of interesting projects. Top left there is the site. There's a drone shot of the site, and there's a small woodland we actually planted here. We're currently developing a master plan for this site. It's a 1-acre rural plot, and the idea is to see us become a destination distillery where eco-tourists can come and see the operation, taste the spirits, and share knowledge and meet us and meet the people behind the spirits. We've just also planted our first juniper bushes on site. So on the bottom left there, you can see that they went in about 2 weeks ago and now covered under a thick blanket of snow. They're going to take 8 to 10 years to mature, but as a whiskey distillery as well, patience is something we have a lot of. So we're looking forward to harvesting some berries off them in the future. And talking of whiskey, our first casks reached the magical 3-year maturation point next August 2022. At 3 years, it's legally called whiskey. So it's kind of the culmination of quitting the jobs in Australia and everything we've built and done, being released as a whiskey potentially in the next year or two, which is incredibly exciting. Finally, as I mentioned earlier, our first carbon report has just been publicly released. And as I said, we want to share this far and wide and share what we've learned in our process to becoming carbon negative with both businesses and consumers. With businesses, we want to demonstrate the actions that can be taken to operate more sustainably, no matter what your size. And for consumers, we feel it's important for us to lead the way and show what sort of things they could be looking out for when choosing where to put their money. By choosing sustainable products, you're reducing your own impact on the environment. You do this through lowering carbon emissions, reducing waste, and saving natural resources. And if we can do that with gin, well, I think there's plenty of scope for other products to follow suit. I have a small ask for you today. Also, I'm very thankful you've joined, and I see lots of questions coming in the Q&A. But if you'd like to join in the adventure, just head over to Instagram and give us a follow and say hello. So that's me. Thank you very much.
That's wonderful, Chris. Thank you very much. I am going to talk for a little while to give you a little break. I am going to launch a poll. We partner this series with the York and North Yorkshire local enterprise partnership, and they champion in turn Circular Yorkshire. And one of the things they like to do is to find out what's going on in the community. So I'm going to launch a poll here. And not compulsory, and it's all anonymous. We'd just like to know if you are on a circular journey, where are you? So I'll leave that up while I talk about other things. The partnership with the LEP, in a month's time, we've got another circular economy presentation, and the plan is that the circular economy officer for York and North Yorkshire will host instead of me, so you'll have a bit of variety. So right, and as I get into the questions, Chris, just to warn you, I'm picking up on the Q&A some facts and figures types questions, and then some partnership sharing type questions, some things on cost and some things on process. So I'm going to try and make sense of this stream of questions and try and keep it on in a way that you can follow, rather than you think this is a bit random. Anyway, thank you very much for everyone filling out that poll. We can see that there's some advances going on quite far into the ultimate fully circular organisation. So that's fascinating. I didn't share the results as I was talking about that, so I'll leave those up on the screen, and I'll get into the questions in a minute. So if you want to ask questions, the Q&A box is available, and you can like or vote some questions if you want. So, right, I'll stop sharing that. Chris, I need to ask you some questions and stop getting in the way with you and the audience. If I can ask you some facts and figures type questions first. There's a question further down on the list about how much spent do you produce in kilos, in tons, so a quantification of your wastes.
So on the gin side of things, we did a fantastic amount of data collecting over the 12-month period. So that's all every bit of packaging that comes in, every bit of waste that goes out, that's cardboard, plastics, wood, everything. I have the figures in a very, very dry, massive Excel report. So I'm more than happy to share the detail with anyone if they do want that. So yeah, I don't have the exact figures in tonnage of waste at hand, but yeah, we've got it all in the report, which I'm happy to share.
Okay, wonderful. And there's another question further down. It talks about Manchester to Berlin as an example, but when you talk about your the offsetting, do you measure it in fairly abstract terms, as far as people like me as a general from the general public wouldn't necessarily understand, and you'd quantify it in more tangible terms of air miles or car journeys or number of household energies?
It's a really good point, and so there's two answers to that. One, we're fully aware that when we talk about carbon offsetting and tree planting and carbon credits and carbon footprints, CO2 equivalents, there's a whole lot of terminology there that a lot of people won't be familiar with. So one of the things we've been very careful to do is on our website, under the blog section, we have an expert talk about carbon credits and how they work. We have an expert from the charity we work with talk about tree planting, both the pros and the cons. Tree planting can solve a lot of problems, but it's got to be done in the right place. There's negotiation with the landowners, there's a lot involved. So we try and make as much of that publicly available as possible. We're on the Instagram campaign we're running at the moment. We are aiming to offset another 5,000 kilos, and we did then quantify that to an equivalent car journey, and it's the equivalent of driving. It's somewhere between 20 and 25,000 miles, which is the circumference of the globe. So yeah, again, it's a good point. So yeah, on our Instagram post we've done that, but maybe we could do that online and say, okay, you know, if you were to buy 4 bottles of gin a year, which offsets 4 kilos, this is what it's equivalent to. I think that's a good shout.
Wonderful. I might come back to the facts and figures as I find them in the list. And I know people have upvoted some questions. I will get to those, but I thought I'd just look at facts and figures and costs first. And one is the startup cost. You had a startup cost, and was that crowdfunding or and what's the proportion?
Yeah, so roughly, I'm happy to share that. The distillery cost, all in all, about £350,000 to get off the grounds and get into production. About 100 grand of that was raised by selling equity, so we sold 10% of the company. About 100 grand of that was raised through the crowdfunding campaign, which ran for a couple of years. And the final 100, you know, I said I went to the bank and they rejected our proposal. Well, once we had a building and we had 200 grand, we then went to the bank and said, well, can we have a loan now to finish it off? And obviously, once you've got all that evidence and you've got a building built, they're much more willing to loan. So yeah, that's roughly a third, and a third.
Put my mic back on. Let the hum start again from my fan still going. I wanted to move on now into the costs from not from the financing side, but from the consumer, the customer. You're going down the route of sustainable products. Surely that makes the products more expensive, and therefore it costs the consumer more to buy the product, or not. Yeah,
and that is a really good point, and it absolutely does. So our gins aren't cheap, and we don't try and compete. You know, there's a lot of contract work that comes in, and people want bottles of gin for silly low prices, which we just can't compete on. And that's something we've been really had to stick by. You know, yes, there's some been very attractive offers and to work with some very, you know, attractive businesses and in big volumes, but if it means we have to, you know, change our bottle or change the packaging or not plant trees, then it's something we're not happy to do. So yeah, producing in this way, we charge a fair price, and it is an expensive way to produce a product. There's no doubt about it.
Great. Now I'm going to switch subjects now, and I'm going to look at some of the partnership and sharing type questions. And I'll select the one right at the very top. Do you select your farming partners based on criteria due to their commitment, or is it just they're our neighbours? So is it locality or their principles? You know, which one do you go for, and is there a trade-off?
So that's a really good point. So we use a heritage grain. So we use a very specific, I won't bore everyone in too many details about the grain, but it's a very specific heritage grain called Maris Otter barley, which very few growers grow because it doesn't yield very much. The reason it's very popular with brewers and distillers is because of the flavour. So in this instance, we have chosen the farmers and the grain because they're one of the few who grow this fantastic brewing grain, which gives a fantastic flavoured product at the end. That grain is grown on the farm and goes down to a maltster. So it's traditionally floor malted. It's done by hand. It's a very laborious process. But I think that would be the next level of what we do. And I think that's important to acknowledge. So yes, we've done a carbon report. We've done our carbon footprint for the gin side of things. The whiskey side of things is following, and we've just got some energy efficiency grants to make that process more efficient. And I think the level beyond that is then looking beyond our distillery and then almost doing analysis of all our suppliers and seeing how they behave and checking that we're happy with it. And I think that's important. We're a young business, and you've got to start somewhere, and then as time progresses, we can definitely look further and further into the supply chain for sure.
I'm going to continue this theme of what you do with others, or could potentially do with others. And there's another question about your box design, which you talked about, that it's robust. It doesn't have the plastic in it. And you know, is it your unique product that you own the design of, and is it available for other companies to use?
Yeah, so the bottle was designed, the box, sorry, was designed for our bottle, but we're more than happy to share. If someone else is using the same bottle, we're more than happy to share we've paid for the tooling cost, so that's done. More than happy to share that if anyone else wants to use that, of course.
And I've just forgot one little thing I was going to say. Do you want to stop the slideshow so they can see more? Everyone can see more of you.
Oh yes,
rather than the slides. That's wonderful. The next question I wanted to ask is it's again at the top, and whether you're exploring other circular alternatives to help avoid sending your waste to energy plants. So are there other opportunities where you? Well, sorry, I'll just stop there and let you answer.
Yeah, so always, and I think that's what I touched upon earlier, saying about it's a mindset. It's not like, oh well, we do this now, so that ticks a box, so we'll move on and think about something else. We're always looking at new things to do. So there's a company we got in contact with recently who, and I think this was another question, someone mentioned about the pot ale and spent lees, which is a byproduct of whiskey distillation. Currently, it goes to a waste tank. It's removed by a waste removal contractor, and it can be used as a fertilizer. But there's a company with a piece of kit that can process that and clean it, and then we can use that on our own land. So yeah, always looking for alternatives. And if the small amount of waste we do send to the waste energy plant, if someone knows of a better alternative, to do with the plastic shrink wrap bound pallets or something like that, then more than happy to discuss that. And actually, it's two sides of it, isn't it? There's the waste we've got currently, and I think pallets coming in wrapped in clear plastic is a good example. At the moment, that goes to the waste energy plant. What we're also doing is speaking to the suppliers who are sending us those pallets wrapped in plastic and saying, do you have an alternative to this? Because this isn't particularly great. And that was really interesting out of the carbon footprint and the work we did. About 95% of our suppliers who supply much bigger distilleries than we do had never been asked the question about their own carbon footprints or about swapping over to a plant-based plastic or using card dividers instead of plastic. It was the first time they'd been asked. So I think that kind of ties into us wanting to share this report and get more people involved. The more of us who start asking those questions and start kicking up a bit of a fuss, basically, I think the suppliers will start changing their habits. And some of us have, brilliantly, some have. Some maybe are a little bit resistant at the moment.
I've got a question I've highlighted right at the very top about your knowledge of circular economy practices, and I'll come and chip in with an observation that I've got as well. Did you have practices and principles prior to beginning the company? And if not, where did you look?
So I could pretend and say, oh yeah, circular economy. Oh, we knew all about that when we got back from Australia. We didn't. We'd never heard of it, and I'm not going to lie. We've been accidentally circular, if you like, from the beginning. So the seed of that idea to wanting to produce a product that could not damage the environment as much as others, and the way of thinking about things, then sort of coincided with us discovering, I think it was through the LEP, Circular Yorkshire, and what the circular economy was. And then we kind of realized the two marry up, and it's like, oh, we appear to be quite circular. But once we started speaking to them, and the LEP have been absolutely brilliant, and they've got case studies and can make introductions, and they've had a whole range of talks. Sorry, what was the LEP? Yeah, definitely go to the LEP if you're after some more advice on it.
Yeah, so if you want case studies, then the LEP or just search Circular Yorkshire, and you'll find some good things on there. I've got a comment, and I wanted to test you out. It's not in the question list, but I remember working with breweries, as in beer breweries, and I remember organising events, and we got these brewers together, and I was just expecting normal industrial practices, I'll call it, that people are quite reserved about what they might share, and I was just staggered. And I don't know whether it's because it was small companies or because it was these were breweries and there was a culture within brewing. They were amazing at what they would share, and I was thinking, normal companies don't share to that level of detail. They don't invite other people in and show them the cost data or show them how to improve something if they're just down the road. But do you find that in either just in the distilling industry or sharing practice with the breweries? Do you find that people are very willing to share?
Yes, yeah, for the most part, yes. There's a great network, you know, there's, what are we up now? We did 45 gin brands in Yorkshire and over 2,000 gins across England. So we have a really good relationship with loads of distilleries across the country and abroad. And it is a fantastic industry. And like you said, with the brewing industry, it's very the same, whether it's food and drink or whether it's across other industries as well. You know, there's any number of distilleries we can ring up and pick their brains and say, how did you do this? Have you found an alternative to that? And they're doing likewise to us. So yeah, there's a lot of, what was the word they had in Tassie? It's, you know, it's healthy competition, it's collaboration and competition. We are all competitors, but, you know, we're not going to give away our pricing structure exactly, or where we get some of our ingredients maybe, but, you know, to help people advance their environmental actions, then yeah, absolutely.
I've got so many questions. I'm assuming you're okay to keep going.
Yeah,
assuming the audience is okay with this, the questions I'm selecting from this list. So I'll carry on going and see how far we get. But just to make everyone aware, we will do a hard stop at 5, Chris, and let you get back to the snow outside or the business. The one question I'm going to get more into the process now, and then I'll skip back and ask some other ones. But do you send your barley to maltings, and if so, where is the location?
Yeah, so that's an interesting one. So the barley, as I said, is this Maris Otter, this brewer's barley, grown here, and we have 2 options to send it off for malting. One, we can send it to a traditional maltsters, so it's done by hand, it's turned by hands, quite labour intensive, but in our opinion produces the best flavour and the best quality malt. Malted barley is called malt. Or we could send it to some maltsters in Yorkshire, so there are some close to home, but none of them can do 100% floor malted barley. So about 10% of what they do is floor malted, and about 90% is essentially done on a mass scale. And we've visited, we've had samples, and in our opinion, the traditional malting gave a better product and better flavour in our spirit. Now, that maltsters is down in Warminster, so that's not local. So it does seem a bit mad. I can imagine, you know, we're getting barley sourced locally. It's got to go down to Warminster, get malted and come back up, which will have an associated footprint. But it ties to, and there's always got to be a bit of a balance, I guess. We're trying to produce the best product we can with the best flavour in a very competitive market and reduce our environmental footprint. If we solely based every decision on footprint, you know, we wouldn't have sent that barley to Warminster, but then we have a product that is less competitive and tastes potentially inferior to others on the market, which then damages our business and prevents us being able to invest more in what we're doing. So again, it's a question where we've been asked a few times, and we're going to raise it again with the maltsters in Yorkshire and ask if there is a way they can segregate and, you know, do 100% floor malted in Yorkshire, in which case that would be brilliant to be able to swap. But for the moment, it's not something that's offered.
I'm going to ask a couple of regulation type questions. One is because you're in a highly regulated business area, but also maybe perhaps where you're based, there's challenges. And then I'm going to ask some things about the product. But there's a question right at the very top concerning HMRC and the use of the reuse of duty stamps, and how do you get around the circular economy benefits, but the potentially the challenges that you get with the regulation that exists for the linear age.
Sorry, just say that again. So this was about...
it's at the very top. I rephrased the question, I apologize. So HMRC, you'll understand that better than me, but about HMRC not being happy about reuse of duty stamps, and how do you get around using refills, even though it's a good thing, it's an HMRC hassle.
Yeah, well, that where do you start with HMRC? It's it depends. So I won't go into all the details, but HMRC have offices all across the country covering different areas. So it can largely depend on your officer and how not necessarily how lenient they are, but how responsive they are to you and what you're doing. So right from the beginning, we've had a really, really good relationship with our HMRC officer. So when we approached them about the refill idea, at first it got a bit of a, we're not sure about this, but we explained it and how we would do it, and we navigated through, and they've said absolutely fine. So the person who asked, yes, it's the same refill, the same duty sticker stays on the bottle. We put a new batch number sticker on there, so it's fully traceable, and then we have a duty sticker on the vessel we're refilling from here. Again, if that person wants to find out more, then they're more than welcome to email me, and we can just give them a little bullet point list of the steps to do it.
Right, and there's I've noticed there's things in the chat that I'll share with you afterwards of contacts and suggestions. So you're generating quite a bit of interest within the sector. The other question on regulation was, did you have any challenges with planning permission for the business?
No, we didn't. So whether someone in the planning office happened to like gin and whiskey, I don't know. When before we put it in for planning, obviously public objection can be quite a big thing, because people's perceived notion of what a distillery is often governed by what they've seen in Scotland, as ours was, to be fair, before Tasmania and before the gin boom here. People see whiskey distillery and they think it's going to be this huge thing with big chimneys and all sorts of traffic and noise. So we put notices up around all the local pubs around here and Village Hall, and we went and had sessions in all those pubs, invited the public to come in and talk to us, and we explained the plans and were very open and transparent about it. And no, it breezed through planning. There were no issues there at all. But again, that's completely dependent on where you are, and as my architect background, it's not going to be easy for everyone getting it through planning, for sure.
We are getting towards the end, so I'll electricity or power questions, and I'll ask them together. Whether you generate your own green electricity, and also, do you have electric vehicles?
So, first question, we don't generate our own currently. We use Haven. So Haven are a utility provider that are 100% green through and through. So there's something to be wary of. If a green business says they're 100% green energy, always just check who their provider is, because some utility providers will offer you a green tariff. So 5% of what they generate is green, and then 95% they're burning fossil fuels. Haven have been independently verified by a company called EcoAct, and all of Haven's energy generation is green. They do not burn any fossil fuels, and they release a statement every year with that being verified. As for generating our own, we've had a quote to deck out the roof in solar panels, and it is something sort of in the pipeline, but not something we do currently. And what was the second part to that question? Sorry, there was a second part.
There was power generation and electric vehicles for delivery.
Yeah, so we don't have electric vehicles, but then we don't have any company-owned vehicles. So the model we're running with a small team, it is not efficient for us to be going out delivering, to here, there, and everywhere. So all delivery is done through Royal Mail and Parcel Force, through the couriers.
I'm piling the questions on. I'd like to run for another 5 minutes, if that's okay. If you could, I'm bombarding you too much to say. No. There's a question a bit of the way down about where you might have had challenges with the supply chain. So whether there's any items to in the production, or as part of just servicing your distillery, that you struggle to source locally, and you've had a shortage of suppliers. You've had that to create the suppliers, or I don't know, twist arms. Yeah,
what have we? So I mean, whether it's just being in Yorkshire, or I'm not sure. We've been really fortunate. The two different box manufacturers we use are both manufactured in Yorkshire. They're having things like the lavender, the barley, the wheat, all grown within Yorkshire. Glass bottles is an interesting one. So there is a glass bottle manufacturer in Yorkshire, but we don't use them. We use one over in Europe because of the recycled glass content and the lightweight nature of their bottles. And the one in Yorkshire, we couldn't find a bottle that sort of matched that spec. Any others? maybe it is just being in Yorkshire, we are blessed or spoiled to have a huge amount of suppliers covering pretty much everything. So, you know, there's obviously things like some of the botanicals, you know, the juniper and the majority of the lemongrass doesn't come from within Yorkshire. And the small actions we're taking by starting to grow it ourselves, put those things in the ground, is that kind of incremental process to getting more control of our supply and not relying so much on importing that from abroad or outside of Yorkshire. But it's a, you know, it's a long long process.
Great. I'm going to ask a dual question next. One on your bottles. There's a couple of questions. One is commenting on the beauty of the bottles, but you know, there's a question about, I'll pick on part of it, whether it affects the recyclability. And somebody else wants to know where they come from. They look Italian styling. So is that where they come from? But you might have already hinted at that.
Yes, the bottles are manufactured in Italy. And I guess it's important to note that that is all factored into the footprint. And while I've just mentioned that, so that's a really good thing we've just touched on there. So when you see carbon footprints, there's lots of different, there's set ways to calculate a carbon footprint, but there's how wide you want to take that footprint. So we could have calculated our footprint based on raw materials and what we produce at the distillery and not looking at distribution, but we've chosen to go fairly wide. So it includes all those raw materials, it includes all the grain, it includes the malting, sorry, not the malting, that's the whiskey, but it includes the wheat for the gin. Includes those bottles coming from Italy as well. That's all factored in, and then goes beyond, and actually it goes to the customer gate. So that footprint includes getting it delivered to a customer as well. Now, the bottle label, so that's a reverse printed label, and yes, that is a laminate. There's a very thin film of plastic on the bottle at the back of that label, so that would need to be peeled off before being recycled. But again, that's having something like the refill scheme, which we're actually looking to roll out beyond this distillery as well, encourages and you know, promotes sort of reuse rather than recycling or binning that.
There's still lots of questions, and I'm going to blank most of them by saying, go and look up on their website. So you know, to find out some of the things. But right down the very bottom, we haven't got much time left, but I'm going to, it's about what support did you have or could you have had from local authority to get yourself up and running and expanding. I'm going to dodge that question in some ways and just say, is there one thing that you wish was out there for support for businesses like yours that's sort of missing in the ecosystem of business support, where you think, if only somebody somewhere would help businesses do X? Is there one thing that comes to mind?
Yeah, and it begin, and you know, someone might have already know this out there, and I guess a basic carbon footprint calculator, and we were involved with a potential research bid that didn't go ahead to create one for businesses. I think that would be brilliant, and it might already exist, and we are speaking to a chap who is looking at developing something like that, where you can go on and you can plug in your expenditure or weight and materials and begin just to grasp your footprint. I think that would be really helpful. But otherwise, the local council here and the grants available have been flawless. You know, it's been absolutely brilliant.
Wonderful. I'm just going to make a quick comment. I'm not going to name the person's name or the company, but there's one person I know, and part of potentially your supply chain, but of the wider drink supply chain, who both he could do a analysis over a cup of tea, or you know, over a pint, as it were. But it was just the quick and dirty look where the hotspots are. So yeah, there are some good tools out there, but it's when it gets into the detail to support you. Right, I have held you for too long and the audience for too long. It's been fascinating having you here. So thank you very much, Chris Jaume from Cooper King Distillery. It's been great having you. Yeah, you've really entertained us and provided such great insights. So thank you very much.
It's been an absolute pleasure. Yeah, thank you for having me. And is there, you might have already mentioned, is there a way if people want to email questions, I'm happy for you to share my email address, or you collate and send on to me, whatever works. I'm happy to do that.
Yeah, will do. So, but thank you very much.
Thank you. Cheers all.